There is other news around this morning. This is in the Telegraph this morning, Benedict. This is Jeremy Hunt saying that essentially the Conservatives need to take their time picking Rishi Sunak's successor. We know he stood twice, didn't he, for the leadership himself. And there is this sort of discussion within the Conservative Party. Do they expedite this and get someone quickly, or do they wait and ensure that they get the right leader?
I mean, it is going to take a bit of time. I think there's been no real desire for anybody to sort of run too hard, too aggressively from the front, from the off, apart from Suella Braverman, who is not going to be the leader for the Conservative Party. So it's, I think all the other candidates recognise that there needs to be a slightly more drawn-out process. But I also think it's a rather difficult situation of letting the dust settle and see who's going to occupy sort of what space, see who is going to run, see who it is that you can sort of form a bit of a coalition with behind the scenes, see whose votes you can get on board with beforehand. So there's a lot of chicanery going on behind the scenes. As to whether or not it's a question of picking the right leader, I mean, you've got this kind of discussion going on now within the Conservatives, which is, should we go more to the right or should we be firmly in the centre? And it's a tricky one because neither really matters. It's much more a question of competency. It doesn't really matter if you have centrist policies or if you have right-wing policies. What you need to be seen is to be competent, because actually the Conservatives talked like a right-wing government, but their policies were functionally centrist. And the point is that they didn't do either thing. They were actually just very poor at government.
But obviously, Hunt, very rattled by Nigel Farage, of course, as we know, 4 million votes, 5 MPs. Actually more votes than the Liberal Democrats, who got far more MPs. But obviously rattled by the rise of a more right-of-centre, I would say, party.
It's a tricky thing, that, though, because a lot of the voters that went to Reform are predominantly more right-wing than people like Jeremy Hunt would be. So if you want to win those back, you're going to have to sort of shunt a little bit further to the right. But, I mean, I wouldn't be overly concerned if I were the Conservatives about Reform, if I was making competency my kind of focal point, because ultimately those votes will come back if people see a strong functioning party. That's as much a part of the reasons they went to Reform as anything else. And I know, obviously, you are a member of Reform, you have sort of skin in the game there. I am very sceptical about Reform's shelf life. I don't
are you now?
I don't think it has the structure. I don't think it necessarily have. This is the thing, though. Will it? And what will that look like? Because ultimately,
I'm not here to answer on behalf of Reform. But
UKIP had a structure, and it didn't necessarily work. Other parties have come along with more of a structure.
UKIP didn't have 5 MPs.
It didn't, no. But actually, it had a lot more ground game, and it didn't get those MPs basically based on the fact that people were fed up. Now, if you're able to sort of nip that dissatisfaction in the bud, and Labour are, not able to sort of capitalise on the collapse of the Conservatives, then I don't necessarily think that Reform does have a 10-year sort of shelf life. I think too much of it currently relies on Nigel Farage, the personality. He's a force of nature. A lot of that is due to him coming back. You see the polling before he came back and after. There's no question that had a huge impact. But actually, let's say Nigel Farage is not around in 10 years, because it's a long old slog being the leader of a political party, and he's not the youngest man in the world. And actually, would anybody blame him if in 5 years he decided, do you know what, I'm exhausted, actually I would like to let somebody else take the reins? If there isn't
Which he has said he would do.
But if there isn't actually the setup in place to take over, and actually if the Conservatives have got their act together, and if the Labour Party actually are proven to be slightly more competent than we all think, I don't see where the scope is. Reform currently relies on both major parties, remaining rubbish. Now, there's a good chance that does happen, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility that they get their acts together.
Well, you and I could discuss this for days, and I suggest we do that at some point. But the government very much in the honeymoon period still at the moment, although Rachel Reeves gave this interview, and this is this morning online, it's in various papers as well. She's hinted she may actually give in to the unions, to the public sector, and give a pay rise above inflation. Now, obviously, we've had the independent pay review body saying 5.5%.
Yeah.
She's careful with her words, because she's saying it would be above inflation, so i.e. above 2%. It won't be 5.5%, because that's £10 billion you'd have to find.
I mean, they've been talking about a, 3.5% rise for certain public sector workers, which would be above inflation, and now everybody's sort of gunning for slightly more. It's not really affordable if you give it to everybody. It's over 10 billion quid that you've just got to find out of nowhere, and it's not just a one-off payment. You've got to keep on finding that. every year. And there are people saying, oh, we're going to fund it through, closing tax loopholes and this, that and the other. And it's a proper kind of, oh, come on. It just doesn't, changing the rules around inheritance tax, taxing the super rich, it never
policies
works.
are paying for everything, it seems to me.
Absolutely everything. And,
like VAT on private schools.
Well, absolutely. That's going to be a one-off payment, and it's probably not going to cover the cost of extra people coming back into the state system. And then, oh, look, next year we can't raise this tax because those people have left the schools. It doesn't work particularly well. But, as I say, sort of capital gains tax, that's another thing that's been mentioned. Are they going to raise that? And you're just thinking, well, people are not going to stick around and start investing very much in the UK if they think Labour will just keep coming every year and swooping down on those things. And, you had this sort of laughable situation after the election when I think it was Andrew Marr on the BBC was saying, oh, well, lots of money is going to come in now. You've got Labour, it's strong, it's stable. Lots of people are going to be waiting to invest in the UK, and you're thinking, if Labour decides actually it's going to hike taxes, no, the money you want will not come in. What you will get is a lot of opportunists coming to buy things at a discount, buy companies and what have you at a discount because people are trying to flee. You'll have vultures coming in, putting in their money. You won't have people going, oh, yes, the UK, what a buoyant market that is. I can't wait to be taxed 40% on capital gains or anything like that. It's not going to work that way.
No, very quickly, because time is tight. Let's talk about the Olympics. With days until the Olympics, the race is on to sell tickets. Yes, amazingly, 500 to 600,000 tickets are still available, including for blue ribbon events that usually sell out well in advance. A lot of these for football, but actually there are 4,000 seats for the opening ceremony on the River's End.
I'm just not surprised by this. This is what happens when you have the Olympics in a country like France, where people do not do anything after lunch until about 4 p.m. and they take the month of August off. When are we holding the Olympics? Ah, I see. This makes a lot of sense why actually lots of tickets have not been sold, because the average Parisian has gone, well, I'm not going to upset my routine for this. Just see some people running down a track. I can do that standing at the Champs-Élysées of an afternoon. I sort of understand why, but also, it's quite expensive, the Olympics. It's not sort of...
it's incredibly expensive.
20 quid and get in.
No. So for the opening ceremony, they are priced from €900 to 2,700. The cheapest seats are at €90 each. They were all sold out. Yeah. Now, if you remember, actually, in the London Olympics, they were priced at £2,012, 2012.
I think that's because London once upon a time was a very aspirant and well-to-do city with lots of wealth sloshing around before Labour came in. All his trust crashed the economy, depending on who you are.
Actually, you're right. It was a feel-good moment. I was actually there at the opening ceremony, and it was just the most extraordinary thing. By the way, just before you go, Benedict, Jane Knott, good morning to you, Jane. Listen, Benedict, reform are here to stay. Just what the voters need. I love you too.
Bonjour.
Bon chance indeed. Benedict, thanks ever so much for coming in. Benedict Spence, their political commentator.